Hello everybody, my name is Leesha Hannigan. Welcome to my tutorial on how to paint birds and render feathers. Let's go ahead and get right into it. So right now I've started on my sketch phase. This is something I've gotten into the habit of doing for just about every painting lately. I used to more loosely block in a sketch with more generalized shapes and large brush strokes, but I found it really helps to sit down and bang out a really clear drawing before you do anything else. Right now I'm using a brush that sort of emulates a pencil, which I really like to use for digital sketching. It gives a more traditional media sort of feel, and it kind of makes you feel like you're just sitting there with your sketchbook, which is kind of nice. I believe Photoshop has some of these pencil brushes included with their default brushes, but you can find some awesome pencil brushes online as well on websites like DeviantArt, Gumroad. Some of them are free, some cost a few dollars. It's worth looking around and just seeing what appeals to you. So creating a good drawing is important for a few reasons. Firstly, it's going to save you a lot of time down the road, especially when it comes to painting animals and people, anything with anatomy basically, because that stuff gets really complicated, and it's good to just have like a clear outline that you can refer back to along the way. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be super precise. It can be as sketchy as you want it to be. It really depends on what you prefer. It's worth experimenting with this and just seeing what works for you personally. But I would say try and get as much information into your drawing as you can so you can kind of refer back to it along the way, and just make sure you're staying on the right track. If you'd like to give your drawing skills overall a boost, it's a really great idea to do some studies of anatomical drawings of your subject before you do anything else. You can find these online. Pinterest is a great resource. Google image search is also fine, but there are also some awesome books out there that are really worth grabbing if you really want to get into this stuff. Terrell Whitlatch has some great books about creature design and animal anatomy. There's a book called Animal Anatomy for Artists by Elliot Goldfinger, I believe, that has a lot of information about muscle structure and bones. That's a really good one to look into if you want to do a lot of animal or creature art. And just for boosting drawing skills in general, anything by Andrew Loomis won't go astray. He's pretty amazing, and you can find all of his books on Amazon. So another important thing that I would encourage you guys to do is use reference. This is particularly important if you're painting a subject for the very first time, but generally you'll want to keep using reference regardless. I've painted a whole bunch of birds in my time, but I'm still going to have reference images just to refer back to. For this painting, for example, I gathered a whole lot of images of different species of doves. I generally mix and match my reference and pull different pieces of visual information from each of them, which I find really helpful. Once you're comfortable with a subject matter, you may end up using reference less or using it more loosely, but it's still always good to have around. As for finding good reference images, we're lucky enough to have the whole internet at our disposal. So you can browse stock image websites, Pinterest, Flickr, straight up Google image search. There are a lot of places for you to find good images. Now, it's also a really good idea to shoot your own reference if you can. You'll have a whole lot of control over your subject's positioning, lighting, and all of that stuff. I'd honestly encourage any artist to invest in a decent camera if they can, and take it everywhere with them, so you can build up your own reference bank, which is awesome. Additionally, you won't have to worry about any potential copyright issues, which is always a good thing to keep in mind as well. Here I'm beginning to block in the form, so be sure to make a new layer under your sketch layer for this phase. Keep the sketch on its own layer, floating on top of all the other layers, so you can click it on and off as you go and just make sure that you're staying on the right track. I find it easy to first fill in the subject with the midtone. You can simply paint it all in, or you can grab the lasso tool, select the creature and fill it in like that as well. Once you've filled it in, you can select the shape by command clicking the layer. You can hide your selection with command H, which makes it easier to see, and then you can go ahead and start painting without having to worry about going outside the lines. As you can see, I'm adding a whole lot of colors right now. I kind of think of this as a sort of digital underpainting phase, as these sort of saturated, warm colors will come through later on. Really, we're just getting an idea of where our warm and cool tones will sit. I have several different images of doves that I'm using for reference for this particular bird. Right now, I'm looking at them and I'm trying to draw out all of the colours hidden in what most people would consider a pretty plain looking everyday pigeon. Paying attention to subtle purples, reds, and greens, and also specifically the warm light that's shining through the outstretched wing. As I have my general colors figured out, I'm sort of moving into the rendering phase now, where I'm basically establishing all my values and I'm trying to figure out where the feathers will overlap. Here I'm focusing on the outer flight feathers, which are called primaries. These overlap one another in a very repetitive pattern. Again, you can turn your original drawing layer on and off to check that you're on the right track, especially with these complicated shapes. I'm often using the lasso tool during this process. Whilst I'm keeping everything pretty painterly and loose, it's important to get a few very selective hard edges in there to more successfully imply the feather details, and that's what I'm focusing on right now. Not zooming right in and rendering every single feather necessarily, as I feel like that tends to look a bit overworked, but emphasizing focal points and being a bit more selective with where I place fine details. So now that I've loosely rendered out the wing to a point where I know the direction it's headed, I'm taking a break and I'm focusing on the body feathers. When rendering out these smaller feathers covering the bird's body, I keep it pretty loose. I'm using a brush which tapers out and it really nicely simulates a real paintbrush. This works really well for these particular feathers, which I generally tend to treat a little bit more like fur than anything else. I'm applying short, small strokes, and most of the texture detail is getting added to the areas where shadow meets light, making small upside down V shapes to add shadowed areas and to show how these small feathers closely overlap one another. So right now I'm adding some warm tones and focusing on the areas where the light is shining through those wing feathers. I've made a color dodge layer, and when using color dodge, I find it really helpful to double click the color dodge layer and uncheck transparency shapes layer. It seems to work a little bit better. The color shows through a lot nicer and it doesn't really mess with your values as much. So this is just a habit I've gotten into. You can experiment with this and see how you like it. It works better using a soft round brush. This sort of allows you to add a more subtle effect. I've added a sort of gentle glow which is coming through these wings. I imagine these are catching some light from the sun. With feathers, you're going to get a lot of subsurface scattering, especially with feathers that are backlit. So experiment with color layers, overlay, and color dodge to get those warm tones in there. So as I progress, I'm continuing to define some of my feather shapes. I'm very selectively adding some dark areas. This is super important and will almost immediately bring form and detail to your focal points. You can do this by using this lasso tool to select a feather, inverse the selection, and then you can paint with a dark tone right near the edge of the feather. This is where the feather is resting, and this is where the shadows will be the darkest. So similarly to portrait painting, one of the main focal points when painting any animal will almost inevitably be the face. Our eyes are kind of intrinsically drawn to the facial area of both humans and animals. Apply close detail to this area and always pay attention to the eyes. This is really important. Right now, I'm paying particular attention to the eyes and the beak. Try to source some close-up images of whatever bird species you have chosen so you can see what these features look like. So right now I'm almost done putting all the little finishing touches on my painting, and this just about concludes my video. I hope you guys have found this helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.